want to close or not? Okay. Okay. So I want to welcome you to this afternoon session. This is a session on teaching and learning, and there's two sessions, two different speakers. Oh, well, one session's more than two speakers. I don't know how they're not all going to stand next to each other like we did. You know who I am. I'm Linda Crow. I'm the Executive Director of the Peninsula Library System and all those other things you may have heard about earlier. I'm going to introduce a good friend of mine who's going to talk about the Digital Public Library of America. And if you were there for the opening speaker, the keynote speaker, Cliff Lynch, when he said the DPLA was misnomered, I had to laugh because I was one of those people who thought it was very misnomered. When I first heard about it about 3 years ago, I thought, there are no public librarians in there. They're all academic librarians. There's Harvard and the University of Michigan and wherever else, but no public librarians. Well, it's not that anymore. And there are public librarians. And Luis Herrera, who's the director of the San Francisco Public Library, is on their board. Are you the only public librarian on the board?
No, you are.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, that's quite an honor to go from not even being any public libraries to being on their board. And we, in California, have been a little bit slow in adopting the whole process and the whole idea, but we are now moving forward. And so I've asked Luis if he could tell you, because he's the driving force here, how we hope it will work in California and what's happening. And you need to tune into that because, as Cliff Lynch said, it is going to be a major source of content that our wonderful new networks will be able to accommodate. So, Luis. Did I miss anything about you?
No, Linda, thank you very much for that introduction. We do go back a long time, and it's always a pleasure to work with you and collaborate. And we are collaborating and making the content and presence for Californians into the larger national landscape that is DPLA. So just a show of hands, how many of you have, in fact, heard of the Digital Public Library of America? Okay, great. So I hope I'm not overly redundant, but I think it will bear mentioning a little bit of the background and how we got to where we are now, and also where I think we're headed, particularly as it applies to the state of California. And I'm delighted to be here among folks that really value connectivity, education, and this is what it's about. And I'm really also very happy that there's more public librarian presence within the Scenic network, and certainly thrilled about the fact that now we're going to be joining the Scenic family in terms of broadband connectivity. So with that, let me give you a little bit of context of DPLA. It began in 2010 as a series of discussions held at the Berkman Institute for Internet and Society out of Harvard. There were about 40 individuals that were representing foundations, academic research institutions, limited public library engagement. But out of that conversation, the idea of having the vast array of our cultural narrative or heritage be accessible, free, at any point of the web, that was the concept. And so the vision was then to create a national digital public library. So within 18 months after that first discussion, it actually has become a reality. So it's now considered a distributed network of online resources that are available free of charge throughout the nation. And it was launched in a year ago, April 2013. Initially, the content represented, we'd say, about 2 million items. Now it represents 5.7 million. So in less than a year, it's really more than doubled, and we're thrilled about that. And we'll tell you about how the partners have made this happen. So the picture here we have is Benjamin Sewell Blake. It's a picture from the Massachusetts Historical Society taken in 1888. And while that doesn't represent all of the content, certainly, it's just one example that you would not necessarily have access to this amazing historic photograph dating back to the late 19th century. So what is DPLA? It's really kind of described in three areas. One is it's a portal. a typical website that allows access to students, researchers, the public at large, of amazing resources that are available through our libraries or our historical societies, anywhere from rural Kansas to urban libraries back east in the West, etc. It's also a platform, and by what we mean by that is open access that allows, and we're working on this, more mobility. Instead of just relying on the web, we know that the future is all about mobility through handheld devices, etc. So it's a platform that will allow for us to be able to manipulate the data, the content of DPLA for easy access. And it's a strong public option. What this means is that we value free access, collaboration with other entities so that it continues to be sustained as an entity that supports any entity that again, allows free public access. So here's the portal for discovery. And I'm going to very quickly walk you through the highlights of what's available. You see here that it's obviously searchable. You have an exhibition space. You can explore by place. Obviously has some applications that you can use to download the information. And the wealth of information or knowledge that's represented by this particular exhibition on prohibition rotates. And again, I'll share some information about how those are curated. So there's a exploration by time, literally through centuries. You can either pick a specific century or drill down to a decade or drill down to a specific date. It's a very innovative kind of a timeline that you can just switch back and forth until you reach your particular decade and then drill down. It also can be browsed by place if you're interested in knowing or interested in what kind of digital material they have from your hometown or from the state where you originated. You can also do it by geography. It's got a wonderful map interface. And explore the curated exhibits. Right now, we just launched some new exhibits that were curated by library science students. We had an open competition, and there's a wonderful one on American theater during the Depression era. And it's really fascinating to see that. So I encourage you to take a look at the portal, which is dp.la. It's easy to get to it. The exhibitions range from prohibition, Native American experience in the Midwest. So the amazing collection of not just photographs, but also some audiovisual materials, sound recordings. It includes manuscripts. It includes books, and so forth. So it's a very diverse type of format of the DPLA. You can save searches. You can actually sign up for an account. And if you're looking for information and want to store it or download it, you can also do that. So it's got more versatility than your typical website. So the question we always get is the obvious. Where does the content come from, right? I mentioned 5.7 million items. So it's really two areas that it's easy to understand once you get kind of that dichotomy, that definition. We're calling them content and service hubs, okay? And this began with a hubs pilot project that basically wanted to build on what was already out there. We did not want to create the world's largest library. DPLA is not that. What it is, it basically links metadata from the owning institutions. And so the first one is the content hub, which are large digital libraries that already exist. And there's about 12 content hubs that have agreements one-to-one with DPLA to share their content. Here you're representing the New York Public Library, one of the few public libraries that's its individual content hub. You have the Smithsonian, you have Art Store, which is an amazing digital collection of artifacts in the art and museum world. You also have the David Rumsey map collection, or you'll have a Biosphere Heritage Library that is amazing in terms of biodiversity. The Hathi Trust provides over 1.6 million items. And most recently, and the only content hub to date in California is the University of Southern California. So that's our entry into the DPLA through content hubs. And again, as I mentioned, these collections already exist. The threshold is to provide a minimum of 250,000 items to be considered a content hub. So not many players in our national landscape can actually tout that, but it is continuing to grow, and those agreements are really important. The service hubs are the state and regional digital libraries that exist. Okay, so in this particular case, you see the Minnesota Digital Library, and then you drill down to the Goodhue County Historical Society. They're already working in a collaborative fashion to provide not only digitizing and scanning, to scale it within the state, but also to make those available then at a much higher level of access through the DPLA. The service hubs also have an understanding that they will provide digitization service, training, some additional support that the content hubs don't necessarily provide. So it's a service entity in addition to providing some of the actual content. So to date, there's about 13, and they continue to grow. Minnesota, a lot of the state libraries have led efforts to have these digital collections become service hubs. One of the latest ones is the Portals to Texas History, the Georgia Digital Library, the Empire State, which represents New York. All of those are collaborating to provide amazing content and services through DPLA. So I love this photograph. What they've told us in Minnesota is that their actual access to their content has more than doubled since they become members of DPLA because of obviously that exposure at a much broader network. So it's also a platform to build upon, meaning that we have an application interface that allows individuals to design their own applications to be able to download the information. This is really important because we don't want to be confined with strictly the portal, but rather have folks innovate and create opportunities for easier access. One of the innovative apps that is shown here is OpenPix. And I've downloaded it in my own iPhone. And basically, you can download some of the images from DPLA through your handheld. So you can search that and, again, customize your own searches. There's another one called Culture Collage that does a similar thing. So these applications are free. DPLA is encouraging folks to be as creative as possible because it is open source in terms of the API. And again, one of the other core values is free data. You can download the entire records that are available through DPLA if you are interested, again, in creating and customizing applications or want to share the data. There's no proprietary investment, if you will, but we want to make sure that it's free-flowing. So we obviously have considerations for copyright. The initial thrust of our collections are public domain items, but we're working with other entities to ensure that any of the copyright issues are addressed because we know that that's an issue in terms of digitized collections in our country. We also believe in the core value that I think all of you subscribe to, which is how do we make the information in DPLA much more robust and much more interactive. So we work very closely in supporting free and open access through our application process, through working agreements with the service hubs and the content hubs, but also with other like-minded organizations that support the issues of copyright or the issues dealing with free access on published materials. So the highlight here are three different entities. The first one is Creative Commons, which allows individuals to look at free legal tools that, again, if you are interested in providing access but want to make sure that you're on the right track from a legal standpoint, you can work with Creative Commons to, again, get that information that you might need. At the very top of the page is Unglue It, which is really a Kickstarter concept for self-published materials. You can actually determine your own price based on the marketplace. And these are collaborations that DPLA is very interested in supporting because ultimately some of this material can be part of the broader DPLA content. And then the middle one is called the History Harvest. This is under the auspices of the University of Nebraska. And once in a while, they put a call out to community members to share their photographs, their manuscripts, and to actually make them accessible. And they provide some level of training and scanning materials through the university. And again, it's called the History Harvest. And that's a type of example that we want to use to be able to scale the content that we have through DPLA. Another aspect of this open aspect is what we call the working with like-minded organizations like GLAM. GLAM is the acronym for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. And they've been very proactive and one of the first to provide shared access through what they call a Wikimedia to share information that impacts that entire industry of museums and galleries. So I want to talk now a little bit about exploring a distributive model. One of the things that we noticed was happening in the DPLA environment is that, frankly, it's very East Coast centric. And we really want to push the envelope and say, what about California? We all know that there's remarkable collections, a lot of work that's been taking place in California, but somehow we've been slow. And maybe it's because we want to do it right in terms of how we contribute those collections into a broader national arena so that it's accessible. There are some wonderful examples that already exist, and I'm going to mention the California Digital Library. All of you probably are familiar with it through the UCs, which is phenomenal work. But there are two statewide efforts that have been led in great part through federal funding through the state library. The first is the California Digital Newspaper Collection that, believe it or not, has pioneered digitization efforts for newspapers. Over 62,000 different items and more than 6 million articles, newspaper articles, that are available post-1846. So that represents a remarkable collection in the newspaper area that we want to, at some point, make available through DPLA. And we'll talk about how we're going to get to that aspect. Another wonderful example of collaboration has been in, again, a niche area, which is the California Audiovisual Preservation Project. And this represents moving sound images, motion pictures, if you will, of historic California. I listened to some of them, and they're really remarkable. It's the 1960 convention, if you will. And you can listen to some of the audio tapes from that era. Again, an example of projects that are already taking place, but that we have not been able to share at a broader level other than through some limited state funding. We also want to explore a hybrid model. DPLA talks about content hubs and service hubs, but we want to push the envelope. We've already had conversations with Emily Gore, the director of content for DPLA, of creating a hybrid model. And that's where California, I think, would be a great player. That it would be a combination of some of the efforts that are taking place already through the newspaper project or the AV preservation project. And then we want to build on some exciting stuff that's happening at the community level. One example comes to mind in Pasadena. They're working with the City College, with the public library, the Historic Society right there in the city. And they're collaborating to create their own content or to digitize their content, but also make it available at the regional basis. We do not want to duplicate that or impede that. Rather, we want to make sure that all those examples up and down the state are coordinated so that at some point we provide the services to either train or scale those projects up and down the state. And I know all of you represent your respective communities, have great examples of what's going on already. Okay, almost done. Aggregation centers, those are sort of the larger entities that would help host some of these collections, that would allow for storage of some of the content that we would have. So we're looking at a combination of both digitization centers and aggregation centers to help our communities. So we're also exploring a digital hubs pilot, and I think we're making some progress. We've been working with Lane Farley from the CDL, the California Digital Library, and I'm very pleased that they're really looking at becoming a content hub for DPLA. So imagine what all those riches that are already captured through the CDL and now will be part of that agreement. So it'll be the second content hub in the state. But we want to link the public library community. And so we're exploring both the San Francisco Public Library and the Los Angeles Public Libraries as two examples of connecting with CDL, the California Digital Library, and harvesting some of the valuable collections that we have at the public library arena, and again, exploring that as possible content through DPLA. So it's a very early start to this project. We're looking at a timeline from the month of March of this year to March of next year. We're looking at some project management funding to allow us to harvest these collections. LAPL has some remarkable collections, from fruit crate labels that they house to collections from Charles Lummis and some of the autograph photographs that he had, to the San Francisco Public Library that has the Harvey Milk collection, the 1906 earthquake collections. Those are just examples of the type of content that we want to see available through DPLA. So we're just beginning. I want to do a shout out to Darla Gunning from the State Library, Linda Crow, that are partners in crime in this initiative. But we want to take the show on the road and see if we can really get California to be a key player in sharing this wealth of remarkable content throughout the nation and beyond. So
I can
stop
get
there.
time for two questions. Get strict about this.
Luis,
Don.
you mentioned you were going to say more about the newspaper project. Is there more to say about that?
I will defer to Darla to say more about it. I will say that I mentioned the actual items, 62,000 items right now. The collection dates back to 1846, and about 6 million different items. But it's out of the University of California, Riverside. It's part of a project that they've actually housed there for a while, and it's just a remarkable project. Take a look at the website, and it gives you the search capabilities that it currently has.
So that's content that you will or do have access to?
We have access to it at the state level, but we eventually want to loop it into the DPLA model. Okay, great.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right, this was fun.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
All right.